The movie opens up in a restaurant named Soul Kitchen, which is run by a lazy but ambitious man named Xenos. He's the head chef as well, and his dishes appear to be very unhygienic. Nonetheless, several customers flock to the restaurant every night, as the prices are very cheap. Other employees in the restaurant are the waitress, Lutz, the bartender, and an old man named Socrates, who contributes very little but gets to stay for free. Outside his work life, Xenos has a girlfriend named Lucia, who is a wealthy businessman's daughter. The two appear to be in love, but they often quarrel with each other. As of now, Lucia is planning to go to Shanghai for an internship program, but Xenos wants her to stay. One night after closing the restaurant, as Xenos is heading home, he runs into his childhood friend, Neumann. The latter appears to have become a successful investor and is very rich these days. He then asks Xenos about his work, and our hero replies that he owns a restaurant. Neumann promises to visit it someday before departing. In the next scene, Xenos joins his girlfriend's family for dinner at an upscale restaurant. For the first few minutes, everything goes well, but then the couple starts arguing again. When the matter escalates, Lucia's grandmother shouts at them to remain silent. Meanwhile, in another part of the restaurant, a customer seems to be dissatisfied with his food. He summons the chef and demands that he heat the food again. However, the chef, Shane, turns out to be an extremely proud man who refuses to take orders. He instead stabs his knife in the customer's table, asking him to eat whatever he is given. Because of the commotion, the manager intervenes and eventually fires him. Xenos watches this go down from a distance and is intrigued. After a while, he talks to Shane outside the restaurant and offers him a job at Soul Kitchen. The latter agrees and decides to visit him in a few days' time. At night, Xenos and Lucia spend some private time together. Since she's leaving for China the next morning, she teaches him how to use Skype. She also promises to be in regular contact. The following morning, Xenos drops her to the airport and emotionally bids goodbye. He mentions that he loves her a lot, and she reciprocates his feelings. Following this, we're introduced to Elias, a prisoner who is serving a 1-year sentence for robbery. He's revealed to be Xenos' brother and has a serious gambling addiction problem. Since he has arrangements with some gang members, the police have given him a special privilege. Every weekend, he's allowed to go outside the prison and do whatever he desires. But he'll have to report back before midnight. That evening, he meets Xenos at his restaurant, taking him by surprise. Elias then asks his brother for help. He wants to get a job at the restaurant. He reveals that the prison officials will grant him leaves like this every day if he has a real job. He then brings out a contract and asks his brother to sign it. Xenos is a bit skeptical about it, as he doesn't want to get into trouble. But since he loves his brother a lot, he reluctantly agrees. The following morning, as Xenos is trying to lift a heavy object in the kitchen, he ruptures his hernia, causing him a lot of pain. Later, his employees urge him to visit the doctor immediately, stating that the problem could be serious. However, Xenos refuses, as he doesn't have health insurance. At night, as he calls his girlfriend on Skype, she notices his distress and asks what's wrong. Xenos truthfully tells her about his condition, and in response, she gives him the contact of one of her friends, who is a chiropractor. Xenos then mentions that he misses her a lot and wants to see her soon. However, she says that she won't be back for 6 months. This upsets Xenos, and he decides to come all the way to Shanghai to be with her. Starting the next day, he buys a lot of Chinese books and begins reading them. He also goes to the chiropractor, who turns out to be a beautiful lady named Anna. She assesses his problem and suspects that the situation might be serious. She wants him to visit the doctor ASAP. However, Xenos decides to bear the pain for now. Hearing this, she teaches him some exercises and dance moves which can help alleviate his pain. In the next scene, Shane the chef arrives at the restaurant. When he checks their menu, he is disgusted. He tells Xenos that he isn't going to cook such garbage. He will prepare his own set of delicacies. Xenos, who is in no condition to cook himself, has no choice but to agree. As the two are talking, the tax officers, led by Frau Schuster, suddenly arrive. She informs Xenos that his tax is overdue, so he'll have to pay up right now. Our poor guy has no money to offer, so she confiscates his musical speakers instead. Because of this, Lutz and his rock star friends decide to play some songs themselves. That night, a steady flow of customers arrive, but when they learn that the menu has been changed, they grow irritated. They demand their usual meatballs and pizza, but Shane refuses to cook them. As a result, all the customers storm out of the restaurant. Enraged by the situation, Zenos orders all of his employees to go home and closes the place. At this point, he can't even walk properly because of his back pain. As he's lying on the couch, his friend Neumann arrives. The two have some chit-chat before the rich guy takes him outside. He shows off his numerous properties and businesses, which appear to be worth millions. Then, out of the blue, Neumann asks Zenos to sell his restaurant to him. Turns out he wants to demolish the place, refurbish it, and resell it for a higher price. However, Zenos refuses, as he considers the restaurant his baby. That night, Lutz and his friends once again play some music, but this time they've brought heavy equipment. This attracts some local metalheads, and the restaurant immediately becomes full. Now that the place has become lively, they demand some food. Since Zenos is in no condition to cook, he summons Shane. After this, the new chef gets to work and prepares some wonderful meals. When served to the customers, they absolutely love it. As the days go by, the restaurant slowly starts coming to life. People are loving the new music, the food, and the ambience. Elias has also started taking his job seriously, and he appears to be smitten by the waitress. However, Zenos is still adamant on going to China to be with his girlfriend. Currently, he is looking for a manager who can take care of the restaurant in his absence. He thinks the waitress is the right person and asks her about it. However, she declines, stating that she wants to become a painter instead. The following night, hundreds of people enter the restaurant, taking everyone by surprise. Turns out a music festival was held nearby, and the people are coming here for food. Despite the sheer number of customers, Zenos and his team get to work and serve everyone. Cut to several weeks later, Soul Kitchen has now become one of the top restaurants in the neighborhood. Zenos is making a lot of money, and he uses it to completely refurbish the place. In his free time, he also learns some cooking skills from Shane. Meanwhile, Neumann keeps asking Zenos to sell the property, but he's always met with disappointment. A few days later, Zenos makes the tough decision to make his brother Elias the manager of Soul Kitchen. This is because he doesn't trust anyone else. Later, the two go to the notary office, where Zenos signs an official contract, thus making Elias in charge of everything. He also allows his homeless brother to stay in his apartment while he's gone. That night, as Shane cooks in the kitchen, he adds a secret element. When Zenos asks about it, he reveals that it's an aphrodisiac herb. These herbs are known to evoke sexual desires within people. Since it is Zenos' last day here, he wants to go out with a bang. So he asks the chef to add more of this herb, to which the latter gladly agrees. Unfortunately, this turns out to be a bad decision, as all the customers become extremely aroused and start having intercourse with one another. Even the tax revenue officer, Schuster, gets in on the act. Right in front of everyone, she and Neumann have vigorous coitus. However, the next morning, she immediately regrets her actions. When she finds out that Neumann has taken pictures of their encounter, she vows to take revenge. Meanwhile, Zenos packs his belongings and heads to the airport. But as he's about to enter the waiting room, he surprisingly bumps into his girlfriend, Lucia. With tears in her eyes, she reveals that her grandmother passed away, and that's why she's here. Zenos understands her situation and comforts her. He then asks her to wait while he gets his luggage, but she ignores him and walks away. Unfortunately, as Zenos tries to pick up his heavy luggage, he completely ruptures his hernia, and now he can't even stand up. The ambulance soon arrives and takes him to the hospital. There, the doctor reveals that they have to conduct an immediate surgery. Since Zenos doesn't have health insurance, he inquires about the consequences if he doesn't proceed with it. In response, the doctor says that the hernia will continue to grow until he is no longer able to walk. He also gives him some medicine and advises him to take bed rest for some days. Left with no options, Zenos decides to stay away from his restaurant for the time being. He repeatedly calls Lucia, but she won't answer. It's almost as if she's hiding something from him. One day, he tracks down her grandmother's funeral ceremony and goes there to meet her. But upon arrival, he finds her with another man. Enraged, Xenos lunges at the man, causing complete chaos. He inadvertently knocks down the coffin, which exposes the dead grandmother's corpse. Back at the Soul Kitchen, Elias is doing a great job managing the place. But that all changes when Neumann arrives and challenges him to play cards. For the first few games, Elias emerges victorious, which makes him believe that it's his lucky day. But when he starts betting huge amounts, he loses every time. Eventually, he is left with a massive debt of 100,000 euros, which can only be settled by handing over the restaurant to Neumann. Turns out this was the cunning investor's plan all along. The following day, the two go to the notary office and sign some documents. The officer says that Neumann will officially become the owner of the place by next week. In the next scene, Xenos finally arrives home and gets to know the bad news. He shouts at his brother for his carelessness, but he's in so much pain that he can't even punish him. That night, the desperate brothers decide to break into Neumann's office and steal the contract. They want to tear it off so that Neumann doesn't officially become the new owner. After searching for a while, Xenos eventually gets his hands on the contract. But while they're trying to escape, the cops arrive at the scene. Xenos can't even move, let alone run, so they are easily arrested. A few days later, Xenos is released from custody, but Elias is given a 10-year sentence due to his past offenses. The two brothers bid an emotional goodbye before parting ways. Xenos then goes to an unorthodox doctor to treat his back pain. Apparently, this man uses gruesome techniques to cure his patients. Xenos is scared to proceed, but the chiropractor Anna encourages him, and he is eventually cured. The movie then cuts to several years later, and Xenos is now working as a forklift driver. One day, Lucia invites him for lunch to apologize. She reveals that after her grandmother's death, she was mentally broken, so she started having an affair with a Chinese guy to find comfort. Xenos forgives her and asks what's next. In response, Lucia says that she'll be traveling back to China to be with the same man again. This deeply upsets Xenos, but he accepts her decision. Meanwhile, Elias is still in the prison, and he has become a respected guy there. The investor Neumann has also been locked up recently. Turns out the tax revenue officer Schuster took revenge on him by bringing up his unpaid taxes and money laundering schemes. Elsewhere, when Xenos gets to know that Soul Kitchen's property has been seized by the government, he decides to buy it. Since he doesn't have any cash, he requests his rich ex-girlfriend Lucia for help. The latter still feels guilty about her betrayal, so she promptly gives him a check of 200,000 euros. Following this, Xeno buys the property and once again rebuilds Soul Kitchen from scratch. In the final scene, he prepares a lovely dinner and serves his only customer, who turns out to be none other than his new girlfriend, Anna.